Today we dive into one of the most heartbreaking, emotional, and deeply human stories in American music history. The rise, the silence, and the unspeakably difficult battle of Michael Bolton. A man whose voice once shook arenas, whose songs lived in every radio station, every movie soundtrack, every wedding, every heartbreak, and every memory. A man who defined power ballads for an entire generation. A man who was celebrated for his strength, passion, and unstoppable energy. And a man who now faces one of the most aggressive and terrifying diagnoses a human being can ever receive, glioblastoma, an invasive brain cancer that changed every part of his life in a single moment. This is not just the story of a musician. This is the story of a warrior, a father, a global icon, and a man who suddenly found himself in a battle far away from the lights of the stage, far away from screaming crowds, and far away from the comfort of normal life. This is a journey into a world where fame offers no protection, where success provides no shield, and where even icons must confront the fragility of human life. This is the emotional story of Michael Bolton, from the brightest heights of musical superstardom to the lonely, painful, and uncertain road of fighting for survival. We begin decades ago, long before the headlines, before the diagnosis, before the surgeries. We begin with a young boy from New Haven, Connecticut, who had a dream far bigger than his circumstances. Michael Bolton, yes, that was his real name, grew up in a family that loved music, but no one could have predicted the destiny waiting for him. He wasn't the overnight success people imagine. He struggled for years. He lived close to poverty. He was rejected over and over. He spent a decade trying to break into the industry, never giving up even when the world didn't seem to care. His voice, powerful, soulful, unlike anything else, was the weapon he kept sharpening. It wasn't until the late 1980s, after years of setbacks, that the world finally heard what he had inside. And then everything changed. The world was introduced to Michael Bolton, the man with the hair, the man with the voice. The man who could hold a note with so much power that it felt like your heart stopped just to listen. How Am I Supposed to Live Without You didn't just top charts, it became a cultural moment, a signal that a new superstar had arrived. His voice became the soundtrack of American love stories. His music lived in homes, in malls, in movie theaters, and in every radio station across the country. Awards poured in, Grammys, multi-platinum albums, sold-out world tour. But what makes Michael Bolton's story so powerful is not just the success, it's the warmth behind it. Fans adored him not just because he could sing, but because of the kindness and humility he carried everywhere he went. He wasn't the typical rock star. He didn't crave scandal. He didn't chase controversy. He cared about people. He cared about his daughters. He cared about using his fame for something bigger than himself. For years, Michael Bolton was not just a musician. He was a presence, a voice that soothed pain, healed heartbreaks, and gave hope. But life, as it often does, shifted. As the 2020s arrived, Michael Bolton continued performing, continued giving his heart to audiences around the world. No one imagined that a silent, invisible enemy had already begun growing inside his brain. No one imagined that the voice that carried millions would one day fall quiet. It began subtly. Exhaustion that felt heavier than usual, headaches that didn't feel normal, moments of confusion he brushed away as stress or fatigue. After all, even legends get tired, but this was something else, something darker, something he didn't see coming. One day, after a series of symptoms became impossible to ignore, Michael went to get checked. Doctors examined him. Scans were taken. And then came the moment that changes everything. A doctor walked into the room carrying the kind of news no human being ever wants to hear. The kind of news that stops time. The kind of news that even the strongest people struggle to process. Glioblastoma, a word that hits like a truck, a diagnosis with no warning and no mercy, a condition so aggressive that even the best doctors in the world struggle against it, a cancer that grows fast, spreads fast, and destroys without hesitation. For Michael Bolton, everything changed that day. His life, his plans, his future. In an instant, the world that once revolved around tour, music, recording sessions, and performances shifted into a world of MRIs, surgeries, radiation, chemotherapy, and fear. real fear, the kind of fear you can't hide behind a smile, the kind you can't ignore, the kind that forces you to confront your own mortality face to face. But what makes Michael Bolton extraordinary is what he chose to do next. He didn't collapse. He didn't run. He didn't break. He fought, not just for himself, but for the people he loves, for the millions of fans who grew up with his music, for the daughters who adore him, for the friends and family who stood by his side, and for everyone who has ever been told that they were facing something impossible. The surgery came first, a terrifying step. It was risky, complicated, unpredictable, but it was necessary. Surgeons worked to remove as much of the tumor as they could, knowing glioblastoma hides, spreads, and resists. Coming out of surgery wasn't easy. The recovery was painful, slow, and exhausting. The man who once commanded crowds with strength and confidence now struggled with basic movements. But he didn't give up. He kept going. Because that's who Michael Bolton is, a fighter. As months passed, he entered radiation therapy, a brutal process that drains the body and breaks down the spirit. Radiation targets the tumor but punishes the body too. It leaves patients tired, weak, disoriented. Yet even on the hardest days, Michael tried to stay positive. He tried to smile. He tried to hold on to hope. Then came chemotherapy, a different kind of battle, the kind that tests not just the body but the mind, the kind that makes every hour feel heavy, the kind that makes every day unpredictable. But once again, Michael Bolton did what he has done his whole life. He pushed forward. What makes this story so emotional is not just the medical struggle, it's the silence that followed. Michael Bolton, the man who once gave his voice to the world, began disappearing from public life. Concerts were canceled. Events were postponed indefinitely. Interviews stopped. Social media grew quiet. Fans around the world began asking, "Where is Michael Bolton? Why haven't we seen him? Why hasn't he performed? Why has the voice of our childhood suddenly gone silent?" The truth was heartbreaking. He wasn't hiding from fame. He wasn't stepping away by choice. He simply couldn't. His body was fighting for survival. His energy was too fragile. His schedule became filled with doctor visits, tests, treatments, and recovery sessions. The stage lights went dark. The microphones went cold. The roar of the crowd faded. And for the first time in decades, Michael Bolton stepped away from the world he built. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Yet even in the silence, he remained strong. He remained hopeful. He reminded his fans that he would not give up, that he believed in fighting, that he believed in winning. His daughters stayed by his side every step of the way, holding his hand during treatments, encouraging him, reminding him that he was not alone. His fans from around the world sent messages, letters, prayers, and love. And slowly, quietly, Michael Bolton found strength in that support. He once said, "Succumbing is not an option." Those words became his anthem, his shield, his purpose. And that is where part one of this emotional journey leaves us. In the middle of a battle still being fought, in the heart of a story still unfolding, and in the silence of a man whose voice once filled the world, now focused entirely on surviving the hardest fight of his life. And so we continue the emotional journey of Michael Bolton, a man whose voice once echoed across the world, now locked in the fight of a lifetime. As his recovery continued, Michael entered a stage of life most people never see, a stage where the world shrinks down to hospital rooms, waiting areas, test results, and long conversations with doctors who try to balance brutal honesty with fragile hope. Michael, who once traveled from city to city performing for millions, now traveled from appointment to appointment, each one carrying the weight of uncertainty. And if you've ever watched someone fight cancer, or if you've fought your own battle, you know exactly how heavy that uncertainty is. The world outside keeps moving. Time keeps rushing forward, but you feel frozen, stuck between hope and fear, between good news and bad news, between wanting to be strong and needing to cry. Michael faced all of that. And he faced it with the kind of courage that makes his story not just emotional but heroic. During treatment, there were days when he couldn't get out of bed, days when nausea kept him from eating, days when the fatigue felt like a mountain pressing down on his chest, days when simple tasks felt impossible. But even then, he pushed forward. His doctors told him that attitude matters, positivity matters, fighting matters. And Michael, a man who had once pushed through every barrier to become a superstar, applied that same fire to his battle against glioblastoma. What makes his story even more powerful is that he never wanted pity. He never wanted sympathy. He didn't post dramatic videos or emotional breakdowns online. Instead, he chose dignity. He chose privacy. He chose to focus on healing, not headlines. His family became his circle of strength. His daughters didn't just visit, they became his support team. They organized schedules, stayed beside him through treatments, encouraged him, prayed with him, and reminded him why he needed to keep fighting. They were his anchor when the world suddenly became stormy and unfamiliar. And slowly, something changed in Michael. Even though the treatments were exhausting, even though the disease was aggressive, he rediscovered something deep inside, a kind of gratitude only people who have faced mortality truly understand. He began appreciating silence, sunsets, little moments, conversations, memories, the warmth of people around him. For the first time in decades, Michael Bolton wasn't a performer. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't an icon. He was simply Michael, a man rediscovering what life means when everything else is stripped away. But that doesn't mean the outside world forgot him. Fans all over America and all over the world began asking questions. Why did concerts stop so suddenly? Why were years of touring and performance canceled without warning? Why hadn't he appeared on TV, on interviews, or on award shows? Some assumed he was taking a break. Some thought he retired, but others felt something was wrong. And they were right. When Michael finally revealed his diagnosis, it shocked millions. It broke hearts. People who grew up listening to his music felt a sudden wave of emotion, fear, sadness, disbelief. How could someone whose voice symbolized strength and love be going through something so devastating? How could a man who once filled stadiums now be fighting for his life? And then something beautiful happened. His fans didn't just react, they united. Messages poured in. Letters, emails, videos, tributes. Stories from people who said his music helped them through their darkest moments. Stories from people who survived cancer and wanted to lift him up. Stories from people who simply wanted him to know he wasn't alone. And Michael felt that. He read them when he could. He listened when his daughters shared them aloud. And even on the hardest nights when pain and exhaustion felt unbearable, those messages gave him strength. For decades, he had healed others with his music. Now others were healing him with their love. As months passed, the treatments continued. Radiation sessions, chemotherapy cycles, MRI scans checking for growth or shrinkage. Meetings with specialists, adjusting medications, managing side effects. And through all of it, Michael tried to hold on to the hope that he could return to music one day, that he could sing again, that he could stand on a stage and hear the crowd one more time. But deep down, he knew this battle would not end quickly. Glioblastoma is unpredictable. It requires monitoring, maintenance, and constant vigilance. Some days the results look promising. Other days the results feel like a punch to the chest. But no matter what the reports said, Michael kept fighting. And behind the scenes, his life took on new meaning. He spent more time with family, more time outdoors, more time reflecting on his life, his legacy, and everything he had accomplished. He started writing again, not necessarily music, but thoughts, feelings, memories. He talked openly to those closest to him about gratitude, love, and the importance of not taking even a single day for granted. The man the world saw as a superstar became more human, more vulnerable, and more inspiring than ever. Friends who had known him for decades said they had never seen him so emotionally open, so appreciative, so reflective. Michael began talking about his childhood again, his early struggles, his rise, his fear of failure, his fight to stay relevant in an ever-changing industry. And how strange it felt that after all those battles, life had handed him this new challenge, one he couldn't outwork, outrun, or outsing. Yet even then, he approached it the way he approached music, with heart. What makes this story even more emotional is that Michael's absence from the public eye became louder than any headline. People began realizing that the man whose voice once felt immortal was actually fragile, human, and in need of prayers. Yet even in silence, Michael refused to stop dreaming. He talked about possibly returning to the studio someday, even if slowly. He thought about recording a final album, not about heartbreak or romance, but about life, courage, and survival. He wanted to create something that would inspire others facing their own battles. Something that would say, "I'm still here. I'm still fighting." And you can too. But as months turned into years, the world began accepting that Michael Bolton's public life might never fully return. And strangely, that didn't diminish his legacy, it strengthened it. Because legends aren't defined only by what they do in the spotlight. They're defined by how they face the darkness. And Michael faced his darkness with dignity, strength, and an unbreakable will. His story is a reminder that even icons fall. Even strong people struggle. Even the voices that shape our memories can be silenced by illness, but what matters is how they face the storm. Michael Bolton's storm was cruel, unpredictable, and relentless, but he never stopped fighting, never stopped hopping, never stopped believing that life, no matter how fragile, was still beautiful. And that's why his story connects so deeply with people, because we all know what it feels like to lose something, to face fear, to confront uncertainty, to watch someone we love fight a battle we cannot control. Michael's journey is not just a celebrity story. It's a human story, a father's story, a warrior's story, and a story that deserves to be told, shared, remembered, and honored. Today, as he continues his recovery journey, Michael Bolton remains surrounded by love, family, and millions of fans praying for strength, healing, and hope. His legacy is alive. His music still touches hearts. And even though he may no longer stand under bright lights, his courage shines brighter than ever. This is the story of a man who gave the world his voice and is now fighting to hold on to life itself. A man who inspired millions with his songs and now inspires millions with his strength. A man who reminds us that even when life changes in an instant, even when the world goes silent, even when the future feels uncertain, there is still hope, there is still love, and there is still a reason to fight. This is Michael Bolton. This is his journey. This is his battle. And this is why the world still stands with him today.